You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I am Adam Lundy. I am joined by my co-hosts Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant, and also a very special guest. We have content creator and East Asian cinema expert, the Fanatical Dragon. Hello, everyone.
Greetings.
Hello.
Hello.
How are we all doing?
Dragon.
Welcome, Dragon. For those who are part of or in sort of in deep with the They Live by Film cinematic universe, and if you follow the Radiance Films podcast, you might recognize Dragon was on with me a couple of months ago, where we talked about some Radiance stuff. So it's great to have you on here to kind of give more of your Asian cinema expertise for these films we're going to talk about today.
I use expertise loosely. I always go with that I'm a fan, hence the Fanatical Dragon name. So I certainly, there's many people who know infinitely more than me, but I've certainly seen a whole bunch. And as far as the channel goes, do mostly focus on East Asian cinema.
Absolutely, and I'll be putting all the links to Dragon stuff in the description. So feel free to go give him a follow on YouTube and social media and all that kind of stuff as well. Obviously, we have 3 films to cover today, so we won't kind of dilly-dally too much. But from any other business standpoint, does anyone want to jump in first with anything they've seen recently that they want to shout out to?
I can get started because mine's pretty short.
Go ahead.
I will go ahead and make everyone feel validated with my terrible opinions that are going to come up. So mostly all I've been watching is Survivor reruns with my girlfriend. So I'm the guy who watches reruns of reality TV. Yes, now. Adam, are you a Survivor fan?
I've seen it. I wouldn't be like. I don't think it airs anywhere over here.
Yeah, I was about to say, I know there's like an Australian one, and then there's the main one here, but I didn't know if that would work.
I've seen it through nefarious means, but I haven't watched it in years. But like, I remember when I watched it, I was like, yeah, this is probably a show I would get into if it was airing every week over here.
Yeah, it's pretty much a weirdly addicting show. I don't watch any other reality TV besides that. But yeah, me and my girlfriend have been going through it because she has watched like none of them. So I just picked one at random. I was like, this one I remember being really chaotic and terrible. So we're gonna watch that one first.
Did any of them have a blind masseuse?
Thankfully not.
But wait, I'm thinking there might be. There's some wild careers on there. I think somebody was a baseball/dating coach, which I don't know if that means they do both at the same time or if that's separate, but yeah, there probably is. There's like 48 seasons of this fucking thing.
Unlike reality shows, you always find people with the weirdest careers though. Like I was like, Dragon will know this show is called The Chase. I was watching The Chase the other night because I watch it when I eat my dinner. And there was a dude on there the other night, and he said that he was a speechwriter as his career. And I thought, okay, maybe he works for like the government or politicians or whatever. And he was asked, and he's like, no, like just for like birthdays or like best man at weddings. And I was like, that's a career. And then he was asked like, what would you do with the money if you won? He goes, just like do up my summer home. And I'm like, how much is this dude making writing fucking speeches? How has ChatGPT not ruined this man's career? Yeah,
well, it reminds me of a joke that used to go on with House Hunters, where it's like, I'm a harmonica salesman, and I am a cat specialist, and our budget is $1.7 million.
Oh man, that happens over here. We have a show called, was it? A Place in the Sun, I think is the one I was thinking. But it's very similar, yeah. Like it's Grand Design's very similar. It's always just like the fucking weirdest careers, and their budget is like something stupid.
Yeah, it can't be like a stockbroker and a girl who works as a secretary in an office. No. They have to invent careers. It's great. But beyond that, all I've really been watching is I'm prepping for going to see Gladiator 2 on Friday, since 2 people here already have the opportunity to see it. And Adam, I know, hasn't. I don't think you haven't seen it, right?
No, I probably won't get a chance to watch it, even though I stand Paul Mescal and everything he does. I probably won't get a chance to see it in theaters anytime soon, so I'll wait for streaming.
Yeah, it comes out Friday for us, so I'm trying to get through a few more. So which ones did I watch? I watched Matchstick Men, which has Nick Cage, so that one's already great. I didn't even have to actually watch the film if I didn't want to, but I can confirm it's good. Let's see, what was the other one I watched? Rewatched Gladiator. I should have pulled up Letterboxd. I know I watched those two. Those two. I watched too many, so I think it was. I'll go with those. But I think that's everything I've watched for the most part.
Nice, Chris. What about you?
I'm having to do this thing where, because the work is really picked up in a good but kind of obnoxious way. So the last 2 weeks I've been completely traveling Monday through Friday, which has really dampened my movie watching time. But what I've had to do in order to prepare for this and then Punk Vacation is actually take a Blu-ray player on the road with me. So I'm getting stopped in airports now because in my carry-on roller bag is a electronic player that most people haven't seen in probably 15 years. So I've had to open it and make sure that it's not a bomb, and they've always check it and all this stuff. But anyways, I've been watching a lot of Vinegar Syndrome and a lot of Zatoichi movies in prep for this. It's interesting. I don't know if how closely y'all have been following the Vinegar Syndrome stuff, but they have this line, just like Indicator has 17 Columbia Noir, and I think it's Columbia Noir, right? Is the one they have so many box sets for?
Yeah, they have five. They have five
Five.
Columbia Noir box sets. Then
Oh,
they have like
okay.
Universal Noir as well. They might have one or two of those too.
Oh, I'm thinking of Kino that has the
Yeah,
20 different
they
noir.
have like noir yeah, they have some noir set and it's like fucking 17 volumes of it.
But so Vinegar Syndrome has one line that has a bunch. It's called the Forgotten Jolly line, and they're up to the seventh box set. And this one in seven is really like for me, you know, I'm I love style over substance. Like if it's a highly stylized artistic film, I'm glued to it. And so this particular box set was kind of made for me. It's all like high fashion world, like surrealism kind of is woven in and out of these films. It's just these three movies are awesome. One of them has Carol Bouquet, the Bond girl, and then she was Boonwell's muse in um, oh shoot, what's the one where she plays two different characters? Anyways, there's or not two different characters, but the one where there's two women playing the same lead. Um, anyways, she's all over, and this is she's in this weird little kind of low budget horror film called Obsession, A Taste for Fear, and just yeah, I don't know. The this box set is really fun. The Forgotten Jolly number seven, and then I mean, honestly, my whole world in this last 2 weeks has just been Vinegar Syndrome and Zatoichi. Um, and then Double Indemnity thrown into the middle of that through the film club, which I'm gonna have to write about. I feel bad. I didn't like it as much as everybody else, so I have to.
Was this your first time seeing it, or had you seen it before?
No, no, no. It's my first time.
Yeah, see, I liked it the first time, and I didn't love it until the second time. So I didn't even post my review because it was when it was my first time watching it, and I read it back and I'm like, this is so wrong. How could I have been so wrong about Double Indemnity? So, um, I think you might like it. Give it maybe a couple of years, or maybe next November, watch it again. Because I definitely I loved it the second time.
Okay, all right, good to know. Maybe, yeah, maybe it has to just like grow on you or something. I don't know, but I struggle with noir in general. It has to be like like a good one, and I think Double Indemnity is a good one, but I don't know.
So some would say it's the prototypical one, especially
Yeah,
from the screenplay point of view.
no, for sure, for sure. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm trying to think if there's anything in Vinegar Syndrome worth calling out. Oh, okay, quickly. I know we have a lot of to get through, but I will say I finally was forced to see my first Polanski film
Hmm.
because they came out through Vinegar Syndrome, and so I had to watch The Tenant. I didn't really, I mean, I guess I could have done it on protest, but I was like, fine, I'll finally just break down and watch one of his movies. Um, man,
Sorry, just before you continue, you've never seen a Polanski film, even when like you were younger or whatever, like a
Not
teen.
Chinatown, not
Chinatown,
Rosemary's
Rosemary's
Baby.
Baby,
no,
even like
no.
Macbeth in school or whatever.
Oh, I don't know if I I don't know if I had sound like Beth in school, I would have ignored it. So possibly. But
That is
I'm
insane.
yeah, like I just thought once I found out about him, I was like, oh, okay, there's somebody I don't really need to watch, you know? But damn it, I mean, he's a talented filmmaker. The Tenant is really good. Um,
Wait till you see Chinatown. Fuck, that's like one of the Chinatown's insane, man. I like Polanski's scum. He is absolute scum. So like I'm pretty anti-piracy, but like, pirate his movies, man, because they're fucking good. He is a bad person, but
yeah.
like pirate the shit out of his films because they're fucking great.
Oh, that's a good point.
And I
That's
mean, you're making me feel tempted just to be an asshole. Like when it's my turn next, I'll be like, so we're going to pick 3 Polanski films. Actually, we're going to pick 2 Polanski films,
Honestly,
and then we're going to do
dude,
a Victor Salva film.
honestly, man, I'm here knowing what my picks are going to be for the next episode, and I'm already considering throwing an audible. So like, we'll see.
I mean, yeah, I guess you can always separate the art from the artist, right? But yeah, I have to figure out a way to get it to where he doesn't get money. Um, hate that dude, but I get it. I do get the hype. I mean, The Tenet is a really interesting film. Dragon, have you seen The Tenet by chance?
I haven't. No. I think
That's
there's a
good.
few Polanskis I've seen, but not that many. And I have the stumbling block of his very strange cameo in Rush Hour 3. That was, I think, probably the last contact that I had with Polanski. That was years and years and years ago. But Chinatown, I is probably the one of his that I revisit most often, but more just because there's a great commentary on that disc by I'm sure it's by Robert Town and David Fincher.
So I have 2 questions. One, there is a Rush Hour 3, and two, Roman Polanski's in it.
Yes and yes.
That is just the 2 oddest statements I've heard today. Okay, just wanted to be
Yeah.
clear.
I was also
Yeah, there was.
surprised.
Yeah, they no, they def. You didn't see Rush Hour 3 in theaters, Zach, the first day one?
No, the see, always thought I probably thought it was a joke because I remember in the bloopers of Rush Hour 2, that guy goes out the window and Chris Tucker says, "Well, he ain't going to be in Rush Hour 3," and I thought that was going to be the whole joke. I never thought they'd actually make a Rush Hour 3.
Yeah, they
Sadly,
have.
they did.
When
Yes.
did it
Yeah,
come out?
Wild.
Oh God. Um,
Rush Hour 3. Let's Google say 2007.
isn't there
Really?
isn't there a four?
they're
Some
supposedly making a four. I kind of
holy
hope
sh
that
sorry.
doesn't happen.
I'm so sorry, but I'm looking at the cast list. Max von Sydow is in Rush Hour 3.
Yeah, yeah.
What the fuck?
Those movies made all the cash, but so by that point they could just literally reverse a cash truck
Well,
up to
I kind of
everybody's house.
appreciate that they're picking like random people to be in it, even with all that money. They're like,
Mhm.
let's get Roman Polanski and Von Sydow and call it a day. That's going to be our cameos.
And
Well,
also, I think there's been many allegations against Brett Ratner being not the nicest of dudes as
exactly.
well. So I think they probably birds of a feather flock together.
Kindred spirits.
Yeah, there's music by that it has music by Lalo Schifrin too. So Rush Hour 3 has a lot of like famous people in it. But the one thing I don't understand, and we don't have to make this a Polanski cast. The only thing I don't understand is that like whenever he's like in around, actors and directors and producers and all that, like he gets a standing applause as if, he's had this like tormented life and he's been on the run and
Well, I assume you're aware of of the of the petition.
what's the petition?
Oh, dude, don't look it up. Do not
It's
if you do not want your day ruined by all the filmmakers that you have to now boycott, just don't look up the Roman Polanski petition.
Well, you're talking about the petition to try and allow him back into the States.
Essentially,
yeah, because he's still considered a fugitive in the
Yeah.
U.S. So.
yeah.
Oh, he
Yeah.
just settled. He settled this year.
Did he? Okay, I didn't hear about that.
It just no, like in the last month or something. I remember it popped up in my news feed. I haven't read the story, so maybe it was a little bit of a detour of a headline, just like we're about to get into in one of these movies. But yeah, I think he settled finally. But I don't know what they're gonna do criminally because I don't know. I don't really even care this much about him, to be honest. Sorry to spend so much time on him. I just don't get it why he's this. I mean, like, he's a talented filmmaker, fine, but like, I just don't understand why people rush in his defense so fast. I never got that.
Yeah, there's a lot of weirdos out there. God, this
Yep.
list makes me so sad. I'm just looking through the petition list now, and it just makes me so sad.
Oh no! All right, I'll do it while you go on your films. What have you been watching, Adam?
So I have a special treat for our listeners. As long-term listeners of the podcast will know, Friday the 13th is always been a meme for us. And I haven't rewatched most of the Friday the 13th movies in probably at least 10 years. So this Halloween, I treated myself and watched all the Friday the 13th movies, every single last one of them. And I'm going to give you a very brief rundown on my thoughts on every single one of them. This is not open for discussion or debate. This is the definitive thoughts on all of these movies. Friday the 13th, 1980, mid, overrated, boring, I guess, to a degree. The only interesting aspect of Friday the 13th is the fact that it's actually not really that much of a slasher. If anything, it's closer to a giallo, and that it's a kind of like a murder mystery. You don't know who's doing the killing. So it's a little bit different to other slashers in that degree, but for the most part, it's very middle of the road. I don't really care too much about it. Friday the 13th Part 2 is a step up. It's good. It's probably one of the better ones. It has a much more likable cast, especially likable leads. I fucking hate the first 10 minutes where it's given us like a rehash of what happened in the first film. So I literally skipped it. I was like, I've seen it a bunch of times, so I knew it was going to do this 10-minute intro where Adrian King's walking around her new house while thinking about all the things that happened in the first film. So that annoys the crap out of me. But yeah, part 2 is better than part 1. Part 3 sucks. Part 3 is awful. And I know
I
everyone
agree.
like a lot of people like part 3 because he gets the mask and stuff, whatever, fine. Part 3 is awful. The lead is terrible. She is like a terrible actress. She's just really bad. Everyone's really unlikable. The obnoxious 3D shots are just fucking grating to have to look at. Yeah, part 3 is like one of the worst. It might be like the second worst, or at least maybe on par with another one. Final chapter, best one. Everything. This is just a kind of like the peak, I think. They just got everything right. Everything that they were kind of working on the first 3. This is where they just got everything right. Jason's the best in this one. The whole supporting cast is really great. Like all the side characters are really, fun and interesting. It has these like really random like scenes that are just like really well directed and acted. That I don't really have time to get in too much detail, but I'd love to kind of talk about more if we ever do like a Friday the 13th special. Because there's a couple of scenes in this film that I just think are just like genuinely just good filmmaking, and really good acting. But yeah, final chapter is the best one. None of them really come that close in terms of overall quality. This is definitely where the series peaked. A New Beginning is underrated. People shit on A New Beginning because, spoiler alert, Jason's not the killer. It's a dude pretending to be him. But I think the film is really good. Again, it has a pretty decent supporting cast, has an interesting setup. It's relatively well made. I think A New Beginning is really underrated.
You said we're
Uh,
not going to argue, right?
Correct. I'm not
All
taking
right,
any
good.
rebuttals at this time.
All right, go ahead.
Part 6, Jason Lives, is good. I don't love it as much as Zach loves it, but it's a good film. I had a fun time. It's obviously very tongue in cheek. They really kind of lean into the campiness of the series, so which I have no problem with. I like self awareness. So Jason Lives is good. Um, Part 7, The New Blood. I remember like I seem to recall that a lot of people hate this one as well, the psychic one, Jason versus Carrie, whatever.
It's
But
fine.
I had a good time. Yeah, I had a fun time. It's very, it reminds me kind of like if like I think this is the type of film that like Argento would make if he was tasked to make a Friday the 13th movie. I think he would make a film like this. So it's just obviously completely out there, but it's a lot of fun. It's not like out there in a way, but like still manages to be boring like a lot of the next few films. But it's out there, but still campy, and it's a lot of fun, and the characters are interesting. This one probably has like the best final guy, except for maybe the final Friday, because obviously Friday 13 differs in that it often has final couples as opposed to like just a final girl. Um, and the one in New Blood is he's quite likable. He's a likable character. They all have typical white boy names, but I'm pretty sure the one in this one's called Sean.
That
I
sounds
think
right.
yeah, I think they all look the same and they all have typical white boy names, but I'm pretty sure this one is Sean, which goes to say how much better he is than the majority of them. The fact that I can even remember his name. Um, And then there's Takes Manhattan, which is the worst. There's no two ways around it. It's awful. It's boring, and it has a setup that it just cannot cash. It's just bad. It's just bad all around. And the weird shit with like Jason turning into a kid at the end after being in the sewage. What like it's just no. No thank you for Jason Takes Manhattan. The final Friday um is not as bad as I remembered it being. It's not good, but it's like it's so fucking out there that you just have to respect it a little bit.
Yeah, it's
It's
my fourth
like
favorite. I love it.
oh, okay, you guys are insane. I don't know if it's that good, but it's it's so batshit that you just have to just like I just had to respect what was going on. I don't think it's a good film or anything like that, but it's fucking crazy. And I don't think it's as bad as a lot of other people say. Another one that I maybe don't agree with the masses, Jason X. Um, I know everyone like kind of likes Jason X because it's like so bad it's good, and I just think it's bad. It looks like shit. It looks like a sci-fi original movie or like fucking Babylon 5, those kind of low budget sci-fi series. It just looks horrible. Um, the plot for the most part is a bit of a bore. Like the setup is interesting and stuff, but like most of the film is quite boring. Um, there is obviously some fun moments, like obviously Uber Jason, the whole kind of subplot where the leader of the group wants to like sell Jason's body on the black market and stuff is funny. So like it does have some things that are okay about it, but I think for the most part, I don't enjoy Jason X, and I don't really get the people who say Jason X is like so bad it's good. I feel like those people actually haven't sat down and watched Jason X anytime soon, and they're just kind of picking parts that they remember being fun. Because actually sitting through this film is a bit of a fucking slog. Um, Freddy versus Jason. I'm a Freddy versus Jason believer, truther, whatever you want to call me. Freddy versus Jason rules. I think it's mainly because I love Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's much more of a Nightmare on Elm Street film than it is a Friday the 13th film, stylistically. So that's probably why I like it, more so than most of the Friday the 13th films. But yeah, Freddy vs. Jason rules. No notes. I'm not taking any feedback on that one. And then Friday the 13th remake, which it's fine. I think it's pretty middle of the road. The first like 20 minutes is awesome. I think we've talked about this before, where like the first 20 minutes is like some of the best Friday the 13th content, like altogether. Um, but then once the actual main plot kicks in, it's okay, it's fine. It does have some moments of just brilliance, like when that dude tells the girl that her tits are stupendous.
Just the perfect nipple placement.
Oh yeah, it's just the most hilarious sex scene of all time, because of the cringe things he says during it. I do feel though my biggest gripe with this film is that they chose the wrong final girl. They chose the wrong person to be the final girl, in my opinion. Danielle Panabaker is just so much more likable, and we obviously spend a lot more time with her than we do the actual final girl. So that'd be my only kind of real negative for me. I think the rest of it's all just fairly middle of the road. Um, so yeah, those are my thoughts on all the Friday the 13th films. I actually haven't watched all that much more except for Radiant stuff for an upcoming Radiant. Well, I say upcoming, it will already be out before this episode comes out, so I can spoil it already. If you haven't seen the most recent Radiance episode, I'll be doing an episode with Kim Newman. It will already be out by the time this episode's out, where we talked about all the October releases, which it's just fucking cool, to be honest, because I think Kim Newman is like the world's authority on horror films.
Yeah, what
Um,
a legend.
it's just insane to me, to be honest. So yeah, check that episode out. And that's pretty much it. The only other thing, really, just I know I've already taken up so much time. I haven't gotten to watch a ton of noir yet this month because my first half of the month has been so busy. But I did watch one called Nightfall. I don't know if I know Chris, you do not a big noir fan. Has anyone seen Nightfall? It's by Jacques Tournier.
I haven't, but I will now put it on a list because
Yeah,
I love
like
him.
Tournier he's a fucking legend, man. He
Yeah,
he
Tiny is good.
he's just a fucking great filmmaker. And Nightfall's really good. Has a really likable lead, um, who's just kind of he's on it's a pretty typical noir plot in that, innocent guy is kind of goes on the run because the cops think he did something that he didn't do. But it's told in a really interesting way through flashbacks. It kind of jumps kind of back and forth to kind of before you get a full view of the events. So it's actually quite modern in how it tells the story, because it will start and then it will go back and then it will go forward and it'll go back again. And as you go back, you get more and more information that fills in kind of what's going on. So the story, the way the story is told is very interesting. It's very modern. Um, but it's all very digestible. The film's like 70 minutes long or something like that. It's just over an hour.
This is a small thing. I looked at the plot and it was something to do with like $350,000. And I was like, how much money is that today? And I was like, $4 million. I was like, this is big stakes type of noir. It's about $4 million in cash.
Yeah, you kind of understand why the bad guys do what they do in this movie when you know how much money is at stake. Yeah, it's really good. It's on the Criterion channel at the moment, so you can watch it there for your own ease. It's part of their Noirvember sort of slate. That's me. Dragon, have you seen anything recently or anything you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, quite a bunch. I'm kind of deep into doing my reviews for Arrow's upcoming Shawscope Volume 3 box set, which I think you guys in the States might be getting dropping on your doorstep any day now. So I've been heavily into kind of a bunch of very, very good Shaw Brothers movies. Also checked out Timo Tiohanto's Shadow Strays, the guy who made The Night Comes For Us and Headshot. His kind of newer action movie that's up on Netflix, which was phenomenal. And just saw The Last Dance, which I think is currently number 2 at the sort of UK new box office openings, which is amazing given it's kind of going up against Gladiator 2, but was a very, very unexpectedly moving and really amazing little drama about a wedding planner who during lockdown can't get work, so steps over and starts working as a funeral director, and kind of works with this aging Taoist priest who can sort of conducts the Hell's Pass ritual at Hong Kong-based funerals where they kind of help the souls pass on. But the old Taoist master is played by Michael Hoy, the kind of old Hong Kong comedian, and that was just an incredibly unexpected, really moving, phenomenal movie that I wasn't expecting to be so floored by. At the end of the film, literally the entire audience in tears and everybody drying their eyes before leaving, and it was really, really good. Highly recommended if you get a chance to check it out. That's The Last Dance, and that's about it.
It's interesting how in Hong Kong they do that. Well, I guess even in the States they do it, but you'll have people like Sammo Hung or some people that are comedians every once in a while deliver a more dramatic role, and it's more often than not done very well.
Yeah. I think comedians often quite fractured souls. I think so that they can often do kind of those dramatic turns really well.
Yeah, good way to phrase that.
I suppose we'll get into what we came here to talk about. So look, Chris, I think best maybe for you to just kind of recap, why you chose these films and stuff like that for the listeners, and then we can kind of get into them individually.
Yeah. I kind of want to set the stage. 1962 is an interesting year in film because it was the birth of 2 long-running heroes. One of them probably more international, one of them more national to Japan. But Dr. No came out, which set the standard for, the spy genre and international action for decades, right? And in Japan, this production came out of a blind masseuse, it was a black and white film at the time, and it was the translation of the film is roughly the blind masseuse. To be honest, I mean it's pretty straightforward, but there's a specific meaning to Zato, which is sort of like the lowest rung of professions. So it's like the lowly masseuse is probably another name for it, but I liked where as we go through these today, I'm gonna talk a lot about Zatoichi, and I'm gonna try to compare it to Bond for some in the way the series was developed, and I'm also going to compare him a lot to Columbo, so just be ready for that. Um, but these films really struck a chord with the Japanese public. So these are all, for the most part, financially successful movies. There's 26 in the core canon, and then a few that have come out since then. Um, but there, I think the whole, if you go through, I haven't seen all 26. I ran out of time, but as you go through these, and as you get deeper into them, you see there's a lot of common themes that come up, and he plays into a lot of what I think was this kind of tradition versus modernity comes up a lot, and he plays into a lot of what I think people were feeling at that time. If you look at the 60s and the 70s, it was kind of a transition period for Japan, more macro level. And I think he's this interesting guy who's a very traditional character, but has, respect, and he has skill with his sword, and he's a master, but he's humble and he's quiet, and he listens first, and he's not, he'll win in any fight that he gets in, but he's not going to brag about it, right? So there's a lot of traits that he has that I think are valued very highly in Japanese culture, and he's like he became this very popular figure very quickly. And the films do certainly follow a formula, but for me, there's a very hypnotic, calming nature to these movies that I've always loved. And so we'll get into whether or not y'all like them or not, but I was very happy we finally got to go revisit these. These are sentimental for me, I would say, in that when I first got into movies, really like deeply into movies, like around 2000, 2001, there was no set with all of these in it, so it was kind of a fun game of like hunting and finding the ones after the first 8 or 9. It became a bit of a challenge to find them all on DVD. So it's kind of a fun game to find them and get to see them again. And yeah, I love the Zatoichi movies. We can get into as we go. The star Shintaro Katsu is the brother for the guy that played Lone Wolf and Cub. And they were a huge entertainment family in Japan. Their dad was very famous on the stage, and also a skilled entertainer. And so they come from kind of entertainment family. Maybe I was going to say entertainment royalty. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but certainly a well-known name. And they forged their own paths in very big ways. The brother, Tomisabaru Wakayama, was in like 250 movies or something crazy. He was huge film career. In addition to Lone Wolf and Cub, he was all over the place. So they're just it's I think we're in watching the Zatoichi movies, we're watching Japanese history or modern history in a way that's very exciting to me. These are all period pieces in a way as well. So you're watching, you're getting to see a little bit of Japanese history, but the stories are all pretty direct about what they are in terms of having some more modern messages and some, I think, stuff that translates pretty easily. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could go on and on, but I think I was excited to finally have a chance to watch these. Dragon, is there anything I missed out as far as setting the stage for the films before we get into them?
No, you did a pretty great job. The only things I would say, I think that there's an awful lot of touchstones because, Adam, I know you've been diving into a lot of the Radiant's Japanese releases, so I'm hoping that you've developed an appreciation and love for Tomisabaru Wakayama, and he certainly kind of makes his presence felt in one of the 3 that we're going to look at today. But Shintaro Katsu, I think Shintaro was the younger of the 2 brothers, right? But
Yeah.
maybe the slightly better business head. And at a time, he was kind of really one of the sort of 2 main top dogs at Dai films. So it was him and Raizo, who we saw in the Shinobi no Mono films. And the 2 of them were sort of presented with a sort of gentle rivalry between the 2. I think they were actually pretty good friends kind of behind the scenes, but they would kind of usually put them on posters together, and they kind of had this sort of double act that they called Katsu Raizu, which is just like rice curry, I guess, in Japanese. And
I was going to say, it sounds delicious.
They're really the sort of 2 kind of leading lights at Dai for quite a long time, and both had really long-running series. So the Shinobi no Mono series and the Sleepy Eyes of Death series that the Rise of Ishikawa had didn't get up to the sort of levels that the Zatoichi did in terms of number of movies, just purely because Raizo died really prematurely, really young. But I think Shintaro Katsu was an incredibly charismatic, really likable performer, even when he's playing less than likable parts. And I think Zatoichi is a much more likable character. From before you arrived, I was telling the other guys about the Hanzo the Razor films, and that's a very different energy and a very different sort of type of performance from him.
Yeah, I'm glad you got there. Yeah,
but he's still really entertaining and oddly likable, even when he's playing that character too. But I think he's never been more sort of perfectly cast, and in a way, maybe sort of slightly typecast himself when he was playing Zatoichi. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I adore these movies, and I think I'm fascinated to know what Zach and Adam took away from these jumping in at the third movie. And kind of going from there. But yeah, nothing else to add at the moment. Well, let's kind of get into it and see what these other two gentlemen felt, and hopefully we can convert them to the cause.
That's right.
Well,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I'll just kind of give an intro to the first film we're going to talk about. So yeah, we're going to start off with number 3, which is New Tale of Zatoichi, came out in 1963. The synopsis from Letterboxd reads as follows. Wishing to find peace, Zatoichi travels to his old village, but only finds trouble when he ends up in a love triangle and finds old scores have followed him home. So yeah, that's the basic plot of it. I don't know who like where the best place to start is. Like maybe let's get some positives and then me and Zach can kind of chime in. I think it's probably going to be the best way to do it. Chris, you probably have some stats and stuff as well, I guess.
Yeah, it's difficult to find box office stats. I was really curious of kind of exactly how much money these made, but just in terms of this, their Japanese theatrical releases are different than the US, right? They wouldn't have movies that were running for months and months on end. They would kind of have these quick hitting bursts of excitement for a film, and they might last for weeks at a time, maybe a few months at tops. And so it was different. It was just a different, they would put hundreds of movies out a year, and people were always looking to be entertained, I think. And so, it was just a different system of theatrical release. But by the time it got to New Tale of Zatoichi, there's the first color film, so it's probably worth mentioning that. The first two were black and white, and they got more funding for these projects now. It's probably also worth mentioning that the first film came out in 1962, and I think New Tale of Zatoichi was 1963. So it's not like a lot of time passed. There was these quick, they realized they had success and they had captured something, so they just kept making them until success ran out, and it was not, it lasted a long time with them. In terms of they shoot pictures, there's only 3 movies, I think, from the Zatoichi universe that are on this list. So we're not going to cover any of them today, except for
Wow, that's fun.
except for Zatoichi versus Yojimbo, which we'll get to. That's on the list. But I honestly think the reason these aren't on more critics' lists is because I don't know that people have ever fully known how to market these films to like the West. And so I think it's one of those things you either kind of stumble into and you get obsessed with, or you don't know about it. I don't know, or you don't really make a priority to watch it. I think they kind of sit in a weird middle ground for audiences now and critics now. But yeah, before we get into too much more, there's not a lot that are going to be on the They Shoot Pictures list.
So what you've kind of said there a second ago kind of touches on a reason why this film, and I guess all 3, didn't really resonate with me that much in terms of the struggle to market it. I perhaps went into these films with maybe misset expectations about what I was getting into. When I hear about a series called like The Blind Swordsman, especially that, Swordsman, I expected a lot more sword play. I kind of anticipated something a bit more in vain with maybe something like, Lone Wolf and Cub, or,
Mm-hmm.
other kind of swordplay films. So when, especially during this first film, when so much of it is kind of character work, and there's very little actual swordplay. Um, like I, I struggled, and I don't want to say boredom, but I can't really think of another word to be honest. But I was just kind of bored. And what didn't help, and I think this, I don't know if Zach felt the same way with this, because when you sold this to us kind of last time, when in terms of this idea of just picking, films from the series kind of at random, or well, picking ones you thought would be good for us to watch, I guess. Um, you kind of just picked a few kind of ones here and there under the impression that, oh well, you can just jump in and watch whatever, doesn't actually matter, there you don't need to know, you don't need any information. But like, I feel that's really easy to say when you have seen the other ones. Because I was so lost. Like I felt like I jumped into this film and I didn't really know even I still don't feel like I really know who Zatoichi is, even though I watched three of his films. I don't really know what motivates him. I don't really know anything about him. His personality is so antisocial in that, he just kind of stumbles along into scenes and into situations and just kind of keeps to himself and kind of stays silent and what, like, he's not a very personable person. So like, I felt like I had nobody. I felt like I couldn't latch onto him. I didn't feel like I had any context for why he's in these situations or why he does what he does. And it made it so hard for me to actually be engaged with the film, because I just felt like I just didn't like, yeah, I just felt like I didn't understand what was happening at all, because I just didn't know who this character was, but apparently he's the main character and I'm supposed to like him, but I don't really know why.
Well, I'll take like the first movie. There's a scene, and I actually really like this scene, where the brother comes in with a pair of dice, and says, if I think it's if he rolls evens, they'll call it, and he doesn't. He rolls odds, and he leaves and says, you know what, we're done. And there's an opportunity. I feel like there's an opportunity there for him as a character, because he knows the truth is he took pity on him, that should be such a motivation, or that should be such a change for him, because I do think these films at times really fail the blind part of the blind swordsman. Sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes I'll watch, I'm like, oh right, he's blind, because I'll just kind of forget. So I think something like that, I think, would help me latch on a little bit more, and that's actually where I thought the film was going to go. And then I'm trying to remember who he actually fights at the end of the third one. You guys might have to remind me, but it was not the brother, right?
No, it's kind of the group of
it's the guy who wouldn't pay for his massage, right? Yeah,
kind of, because they were basically involved in a kidnapping, kind of sort of double cross that his old sensei was kind of basically placed himself in the middle of, and was trying to like take the money and run. So ultimately, he comes up against his own instructor, the guy who taught him how to wield a sword. And I think I don't know if this is kind of the reason why Chris sort of wanted to select number three, but number three's quite rare in that you do actually get a little bit of a sense of Zatoichi's backstory, which was really rare. They kind of, I think, intentionally kept him quite vague in terms of how much they were letting you know about him as a person. And you didn't really ever kind of get a sense fully of his entire backstory. I mean, they often make reference to the fact that he's been a Yakuza, but we never really see him engaged in proper Yakuza kind of group activities. He always seems to be the outside. He's kind of the perpetual outsider, right? And in the Western terms, it's also great that Chris really set you up for success with the ones that he picked, because choosing Zatoichi meets Yojimbo was a kind of a way, I feel, of showing you how close these are aligned to Westerns in a lot of ways. He is the kind of wandering nomad who comes into an area, is reluctantly drawn into combat. He never really wants to fight, but he can win any fight. And that in itself is a trope that we see in a bunch of other movies from other parts of the world. But I feel it's kind of really perfectly realized in the Zatoichi movies, because he is this unstoppable force, but he's so humble with it. He's not ever a kind of arrogant, or he never strays away from kind of being this humble, very simple, taking joys in the sounds that he hears and the smells that he encounters as he kind of goes about his travels. So he's just a really kind of warm-hearted guy in a pretty dark world, every second movie, a woman will fall in love with him, and he will generally always walk away from those situations. I mean, I think the 1 in 3 is maybe the closest that he gets to accepting and settling down and leading a normal life, and that the sister of his instructor basically wants to marry him. And I just find him eminently charismatic and watchable. I think it's so weird to me that you didn't really kind of connect with them, and I guess it's maybe one of these things that you've got to come to them at the right time. I can remember a friend of mine at film school 25 odd years ago discovering these movies, and I really, when he described them to me, it didn't appeal. I was like hugely into I'm probably hugely into kind of John Woo and Shaw Brothers and film noir at that sort of point in my life. And so the idea of stepping into a 26 long series to me was just impenetrable. So it took me a lot longer to kind of finally find the character. And I think the Bond parallel is a really good one. I wish in some ways we'd maybe started with number one, because Kenji Mizumi was the sort of Terrence Young of the Zatoichi world, where he really set the tone with what would come forward. And I think Kenji Mizumi was maybe the entries that he's done are really, for me, some of the better ones, because Kenji Mizumi was a phenomenal director. And I think but I do think kind of starting with the color one was maybe a good way of trying to set you guys up for success with kind of embracing the films, and particularly how much of this was shot on a backlot, and how stylized it is, and how beautifully rendered it is, and how incredible the score is. And the score by Akira Ikafubi, who did the Godzilla sort of soundtrack most famously. His score I kind of find so melancholic and so haunting in number 3. And oh God, this film I absolutely adore. Number 3 is really one of the better examples. So I think if you guys stumbled with number 3, I don't know how much further down this rabbit hole you're going to
Yeah. I had the same reaction when they were telling me they didn't love it. I was like, shoot.
It's kind of heartbreaking, right?
I know. But
I will say this is my favorite of the 3. I do think this for me is the best one of the 3.
Okay.
That's cool. There's one thing too I want to call out now, and I think we can kind of go back to it as we go through the films. One of my favorite, revisiting these movies now, one thing that I really loved about them that I think I didn't catch up as much the first few times through was, you see this guy who's torn, right? So in the first, and I know y'all didn't have the benefit of watching the first 8 movies. I get it, but you watch this guy lose. It becomes like a philosophical struggle. He's losing his attachment to the world he's in one by one. He's losing his brother. He's losing the woman that he loves. Like, he's losing his past. And he's becoming this sort of almost like a wandering spirit. Weather starts to take a stronger role in the movies as it goes on. We'll talk about that more in Yojimbo, where the weather plays such a strong role. But like, he just, as the series goes on, he becomes almost less human and more of like a myth. And he's constantly in pain, and he's constantly struggling to find that humanity, and it's just not there for him. It's like whatever he did in his early years, it's almost like separated him from humanity in a way that he struggles with. And I think, although it's episodic in nature, and maybe it's, it might get repetitive, would be an argument I could hear for sure. But I do think there's enough subtle differences in each of these movies where you're watching this guy just try to like grasp on to something, and just being turned away from being a human kind of at every turn. And it's sad to watch, I think. And despite it all, he has this uplifting spirit where at the end of a lot of these movies, there's always a scene of him walking away, and it's split. Sometimes he's walking away out of sadness, sometimes he's walking away and just kind of enjoying the sun. But it's like this cycle that you kind of get, that I kind of get caught up in, of just watching this guy just try to hold on to the last little semblances of humanity that he has. And I think it's very endearing, and yeah, I like it a lot.
I was kind of curious about the repetitive nature, because we only watched 3, so I can't say for sure I would feel that way. But I did start thinking when I was watching it, as a big fan of Man with No Name trilogy, I was like, I could not imagine Clint Eastwood playing this character 26 times without it really getting like, your returns just keep lessening and lessening at that point.
Kind of. It depends. Usually, they kind of sail or maybe slightly sink based on the situations that he encounters. So you kind of I guess your anchor throughout the whole series is the charisma and power of Shintaro Katsu's performance as that character. And I think you, if it catches you, you're willing to go with him on whatever new adventure he kind of finds himself in. And I think the movies really soar or are maybe kind of slightly kind of less satisfying depending on who he encounters, the strength of the other actors that he's gone up against,
Yeah.
or the how kind of sometimes the villains are more kind of comic book or pantomime esque in their sort of in their scale. For me, it's always a treat when his real life brother shows up, because he shows up in two, so playing two different parts,
Yeah.
and we saw him in one. And I think he's a wonderful foil to go up against. But even in that one, because we'll get to, that's the other one we watched. What is that, number eight or nine? The Way of Gold.
The Chest of Gold. Yeah,
Chest
yeah,
of Gold, sorry. I think the other kind of sort of periphery villains that are often kind of figures of authority, which was a little bit of a kind of running theme as well, where he was quite anti-establishment, and at time I think that's one of the things that was maybe really helped him be so embraced by the Japanese populace, where at a time when they were pretty skeptical of their own government and kind of what society was like, having a hero that's very much a sort of man of the people and the man of the underdog, I think was probably a big part of these movies' success. And so I think it's one of these things that's going to be very difficult and not hard for, or sorry, quite hard for you to kind of find them impenetrable unless you just embrace and go with the central character. If he doesn't win you over, it's going to be an uphill struggle. But if he does win you over, then it's a wonderful journey to just basically go with him through his different encounters, and that's your kind of your touchstone that carries you through each one of the stories. And I think they are definitely formulaic in a way, but it's a formula I really enjoy. So I kind of find that they are kind of wholly satisfying. Just some are more satisfying than others.
I think this is probably what my problem is then, really, because I'm not, I wasn't very enamored by Zatoichi, by the main character.
That's a
Um,
problem.
yeah, that's like, if you don't like the main character of a series, that's an issue. I just, yeah, like, I kind of goes into what I said earlier. I don't really get him, because I feel like if anything, I just regret not watching the first two films. I think if I'd seen the first two, I know that obviously we chose this one because it was the first color film and what have you. But I feel like because I was just kind of thrown into the deep end with this character, that I didn't really understand his origins or anything.
You never do though. I think, and it's not
Okay,
like if we'd started at
that's not
one,
great.
I think one wouldn't have necessarily kind of given you enlightenment
No,
that
I
you
don't think
didn't
so.
get from three.
Okay, that's
And in
not
a
good.
way, actually, three gives you more backstory than you would get in one and two, because you do get to go back and see a little bit of his origins. That's
Okay,
about as close as we kind of get in the series, because, and that's something that we've certainly seen in the spaghetti western movies, and we've seen in a bunch of John Carpenter movies, where the character's backstory is not that important. It's not that's not the defining reason for why
Yeah.
you're sticking with the guy and kind of following through his journeys. It's much more about how he is in the moment, um, than it is about kind of where he's come from. It's always about where he is at the time and where he's ultimately going to go to next.
okay, yeah, that's probably what my issue is, because when I watch him, like, I don't think, cool or fun or like interesting, or like I find him kind of annoying. I'm really
Hmm.
sorry, but like, he reminds. It's like I said this to the guys on our WhatsApp. It's like Monsieur Hello, but with a sword. The way he just kind of stumbles into situations. Um, and yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of find him annoying.
I
I
Don't be
think
sorry,
it's
dude.
the
It's
I
fine.
kind of want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say, don't be sorry. Like in terms of it's fine if it doesn't resonate. It's fascinating to know why it's fallen short. But Zach, on you go.
I was just gonna note. I was just sitting here thinking about it. I almost feel like when you talk about stumbling into situations, and that does happen in westerns. Dragon, you mentioned that. That's a big thing of spaghetti westerns as well. I think the difference I find is almost like a lack of agency. Like, when we'll just use Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name, he finds an angle when he walks into something. Like there is something where he becomes almost proactive into a sense to, find a way through this or find a way to take an advantage of it. Where sometimes I get the feeling that Zatoichi doesn't. I mean, he obviously doesn't want to be there, but also It almost feels like going through the motions in a weird way. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but that's how it almost came off to me.
No, I think that there's the don't fall for the act, because that's kind of the way that he's presenting himself to the world. It's when we say stumbling through, he's a very capable man, giving off this air of being somebody that you should always underestimate, and everybody invariably does, apart from usually the woman. The women generally kind of see him for what he is and see that he is ultimately kind of a man of good heart and good character, despite his best intentions, and despite the fact that often with him trying to do the right thing, it doesn't always kind of go as he would maybe hope. But he is invariably massively underestimated by, certainly by those that encounter him in combat. But I think that's a sort of an act that he's putting on for the world, or a show that he's putting on for the world, to allow him to ultimately pass through with as minimal disruption as possible. And so he does certainly kind of scheme and plot along with the best of them. And you certainly see that in Zatoichi meets Yojimbo, because they're both ultimately, and I think maybe that's why that movie, when we get to that one in particular, is a little bit of a trickier pill to swallow, because you're sort of he's having to kind of mirror an awful lot of the same kind of character traits that we saw in Kurosawa's Yojimbo, where he is attempting kind of to try and be involved in this plot to pit people against each other. So you kind of have two guys trying to scheme and plot. But in Zatoichi meets Yojimbo, you kind of get the sense that the master plotter, the master schemer, is Zatoichi, right? He's able to outplot the character that we know as being a master plotter. He's able to out Yojimbo in that movie. And so I think, if anything, sort of showing you how capable and how adept he is, it's that kind of movie is taking pains to try and show you that he's the master of all, really. And
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I think if you look at the characters that recognize his greatness, it's people that are great.
yeah,
So like the great fighters, they watch the way that he gives a massage and they say, wow, you must be good with the sword. So
mhm,
they make all these connections that I think the average person wouldn't make, but it's like he's so subtle in his competence that he flies under the radar for, in the film, what's portrayed as a lot of like stupid people, right? Like he's kind of just like the Yakuza world. That's one thing I like about it, is the Yakuza world is never celebrated in these movies.
yeah,
Like it's always run by idiots or evil people. And he calls himself a Yakuza. So he's like, he's like, there's a lot of pain in the fact that he's associated with all these people, and he can take on 12 at a time or 18 at a time because they're not good fighters, um, and they're idiots, right? So, but then there's usually that one match against somebody who's skilled, or um, either whether it's a Ronin or whether it's or like a wandering samurai, or whether it's skilled fighter somehow. They they have this honor, and that's in Kurosawa movies as well. I think there's this desire for, like, if you're gonna die as a samurai, you want it to be against like in a good fight. You don't
mhm,
want to go out getting just tripped up by accident by some idiot. And so when throughout these movies, they, as good fighters find Zatoichi, they realize they want that to be their fight, um, and they're happy to die on his sword because of how good he is.
I did want to note, I did find the humor in some of these actually pretty good. We were talking about the women can typically like not see who he is, or how I can't remember how exactly how it was put,
Uh-huh.
but I did love the scene where he's like doing his best to convince this woman to not sleep with him. It's like, I am
Uh-huh.
a horrible gambler. I'm like, she's like, okay. It's like, I am a criminal. She's like, okay. I have killed many men, and then it's like, I sleep with multiple women, and I'm like, okay. He's like, dude, you're doing your best way to sell yourself out of this. I kind of appreciate it.
he's trying to save her ultimately. I think
Yeah.
he knows that she's, and partly they know they have a history, right? Because that's the sister of the guy who taught him how to use a sword. So he's coming back and seeing someone that he has got a history with. We're not, as the viewer, we're not seeing flashbacks where the film expects you to kind of keep up. So we're not kind of like laboring the point home that the fact that they've been around each other before, and she's essentially been forced into an arranged marriage with someone that she knows is not a good dude, and ultimately knows that Zatoichi would probably be a far better pick for her and somebody who would look after her. And I think the moment that she realizes it is when she's walking through the bamboo forest with him, and he's taking such a moment of kind of pure joy just from the sound of the kind of the new springs of bamboo that are coming up. And I think she sort of sees a gentleness in him, despite knowing the type of man he is. And it's I don't think he's blowing smoke when he says that he will try his best to do right by her. And I think she just gets let down by all the men around her, including ultimately Zatoichi. She sort of sees her own brother kind of double crossing the people he's meant to be helping with kind of giving over this ransom money to kind of get back the kidnapped son, and the master ultimately kind of kills the man who has the big bag of gold and is going to try and take it for himself. And his sister sees that, and you can see her heart kind of breaking a little bit when she gets the sense that this guy who is ultimately her, I guess, the one that's putting a roof over her head is a kind of a piece of shit. And then ultimately has to kind of then see Zatoichi cutting down a whole bunch of people, which he'd resolved that he wouldn't do anymore. And that's why he ultimately kind of walks away from her. But I think that whole kind of speech when he's giving her, he is literally just trying to make sure that she's aware of the fact that he doesn't view himself as being exactly the prize for her, right? And she could do far better than him. But she still goes with it. And I think knowing that she's going into it with her eyes open is the thing that ultimately kind of makes him commit to it. And I find that scene really sweet. Like, it's a really nice kind of like, it's kind of one of the more heartfelt interactions he has with women, because a lot of the women that he meets are generally often kind of brothel owners or prostitutes, or kind of slightly kind of more wayward women who have a much more difficult life. And I think we do encounter her again. I think he rolls back round and she is ended up having a slightly different path. Chris, I can't remember if I'm remembering that exactly right, but I think we do meet her character again a couple of movies later.
Yeah, yeah. She's she ends up in a brothel essentially, right?
Yeah, yeah, and he ultimately kind of, but she's kind of a new guy that she's going to be trying to get married with, who seems like a pretty good dude, and so Zatoichi kind of tries to help make that kind of happen. But um, yeah, guys, I think it's I don't know. I think me and Chris are going to be fighting an uphill battle to try and convert you to him. If you kind of haven't sort of embraced, let's maybe jump onto the middle film of the three, because Adam, you've certainly seen. I know that you've seen some of the Lone Wolf and Cub movies, and you've seen Tomosaburu Wakayama in a whole bunch of Radiance releases. He's almost the patron saint of Radiance at this point. I think they've put out more movies that he features in than any other actor, certainly on the Japanese side. So did that one at all appeal? Did you kind of like seeing him go up against his real life brother?
Yeah, we'll get into this. So this is Zatoichi and the Chest of Gold. This one came out in 1964. The synopsis for this one on Letterboxd is Ichi travels to the village of Itakura to pay his respects to the grave of Kichizo, a man he killed 2 years ago. When some tax money is stolen while in transit to the governor, he is accused and sets out to find the money to clear his name. So this one, I was enjoying it more at the start. Probably because just it's let's be honest, it's just a bit more action packed. Um, the kind of setup to it reminded me vaguely of the third Bounty Hunter film. So obviously, speaking of Tomotsuro Wakayama, it reminded me a little bit of the setup for the third Bounty Hunter film, which also similarly features a chest of gold. That kind of
And
goes
also
missing.
in that series, we also got to see Tomosaburu doing a Zatoichi impression, right?
Exactly.
Which
Yeah,
now
the
made a
first
lot
one.
must have now made a lot more sense to you.
Yeah, because I was aware that because I think in one of the special features as well, it had mentioned that it had called that out specifically, that he was doing an impression. But yeah, I was liking this one a bit at the start. I thought the setup was interesting, and I just could not tell you anything else that happens in the film. It once again just kind of it gets for me like these films get bogged down so much in like there's just so many like subplots and double crosses and characters interacting with other characters, and I just get so lost. I get so lost in what's happening when I just wish that they would just make an action movie sometimes. And I maybe that's lowbrow of me to just want an action movie. But I just get so bogged down in some of the I can't think of the right word now, but yeah, like the setup, I was enjoying the setup, and then like I can remember pretty much everything really clearly right up to the point where he's like leaving with the nephew, and he's like he's basically kind of being the ward of the nephew character, and then I just barely remember anything else that happens, because it all for me just becomes very convoluted. But I enjoyed the setup. I thought it was going to be really fun. There's that really funny scene as well in like the bath where he like kind of comes up from the water when that girl is having a bath, and he has to convince her that no, he's blind, he can't see, don't worry, she doesn't have to hide herself. I thought that was funny. But yeah, it's another one where I just ended up becoming lost in what was happening, and just found myself uh just kind of sitting through it, I guess.
Okay.
You know, Adam, I was just sitting here thinking you were talking about the fact you want an action movie, and I think I'm in the same sort of boat where, you know, when you think of blind swordsman, those are kind of the two big elements I'm kind of thinking of. You know, I think of just to give a more modern example, I think of like Donnie Yen's characters in like John Wick Chapter 4 or Rogue One, where you know obviously there's some like influence there.
Hugely so. It's basically
Yeah.
and paying tribute to Zatoichi. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I find these movies at their best when they're doing more with those two elements. Like I think of, you know, one of the things I loved about the way they designed Donnie Yen's character Kane in John Wick Chapter 4 is even the fights are so specific to someone who is blind. Like the way he sets up scenes, the way he reacts, the way he does things like that. And they find such a good way to mix those two elements that I think do so well. And I mean, you know, you're comparing a movie that has a much bigger budget, much more choreographers, directed by stunt guys. I mean, that there's a big difference there. But I think when they have those two elements working, I think it's when these movies are really at their best. I'm kind of with Adam is when we do a lot of this double cross stuff and there's a lot of characters. I kind of feel like I get lost in what I really wanted in a sense where you know, every scene where, you know, it becomes like a plot point of his blindness, even if it's like a joke where Adam was talking about, I think those are some of the best stuff in the film. I mentioned the first one, I thought the dice roll was the most intriguing part of the film since he can't see. I really like those. And sometimes I wish the films would just focus a little bit more on that, I guess. I mean, they do. It's not like they ignore it, but sometimes I feel like it does get a little lost sometimes.
You want the blind swordsman films to be about a blind swordsman.
Right, yeah, you said it much more succinctly.
I mean,
they intrinsically are though, and I think if you totaled up the kind of the amount of time that he actually sort of spends wielding a sword and the amount of punches that Sean Connery throws in the first Doctor No, I think beat for beat there is probably actually more action in the Zatoichi movies than we kind of got in the early Bond movies. And I think
I will warn you,
Doctor No
kind of movie.
Yeah, and Doctor No kind of sucks, so it's not really a great point of reference.
Oh God, okay. I haven't listened to I know that your sensibilities are going to draw you more into like the Friday 13th of the world. So I'm taking from this point onward, taking almost any of your opinions with a massive, healthy grain of salt.
That is absolutely correct.
Because Doctor No is a phenomenal movie, right?
I am the villain of this podcast.
Not at all, dude. But because I think you like what you like, and it's interesting, kind of hearing how they maybe haven't connected with you. And I think I find that the action comes around when it absolutely has to, because he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to fight, and I think action needs to have some sort of dramatic resonance. It needs some sort of substance in story, otherwise it gets meaningless. And it would be more boring for me if he went through these movies just fighting absolutely every turn. I think that the sequences that we get are pretty kind of well interspersed throughout the film, and of varying degrees of scale. And different directors who would come to the franchise would be able to handle that with more aplomb and kind of maybe kind of more style. And I think the action that we kind of get across these three is a little bit not that consistent, where it's kind of sometimes realized slightly kind of better in terms of the choreography. A lot of the time, Shintaro Katsu was doing the choreography himself, and he was kind of the one who was sort of staging and working things out. And certainly that became true as we got higher up in the series, and once Katsu Productions was the main kind of driving force behind making the films, he was ever more involved in that side of things. But yeah, I never found them lacking in terms of action. I still view these first and foremost as action movies, but they're action movies that still ultimately have a big element that speaks to character.
You know, just having been with Zach and Adam once a week for 4 years now, or whatever, almost 4 years now, whatever it is. You know, um, I'm fascinated that you feel okay, Adam, reducing your taste to something that's like that because you like slow cinema. Like you have as long as it's white people in the movie that aren't Australian, you tend to love it.
That is that is slander. That
No, I'm just
is
kidding.
slander.
No, I'm just digging. No, look, I don't know what it is though, because you love like Italian neorealism, right?
Yeah.
Which is not, it's not like there's a, a something happening every second in that, or like you love French New Wave, right? Which is challenging,
hmm
and it makes you. So there's nothing in these movies I think that is inherently different than
So
what you.
I can explain this very easily. And it's all to do with my expectations versus reality. If I go into a series titled The Blind Swordsman and I find myself with very little swordplay, I'm going to be disappointed. Like when I go into an Italian neorealist film, I expect there to be Italians and for it to be realist. And 99% of the time they deliver on that front, so I like it. Whereas when I go into a series that and this is again, I'm not blaming anyone for this. This is my expectations and my assumptions causing this. Um, if I go into a series and I expect there to be like I said at the kind of start, you know, I went into these expecting something in line with Lone Wolf and Cub or even the Bounty Hunter series that had a lot of action. So when there was a lot less action and it was a lot more character stuff and talking and scheming, it wasn't what I expected. Now, like I'm not ruling out ever going back and kind of revisiting these films now that my expectations have been set in terms of the kinds of films that they are. Um, like I've never once said that I hated any of these movies because I don't hate them. Um, I've never even said that they're bad movies because I don't think they're bad movies. I just didn't enjoy them. Um, which is a very that's just a very personal thing that sometimes you just can't really explain why you didn't enjoy something. You just didn't enjoy it. And that's what happened with these films.
Yeah, we're just
I
talking
think for
about.
me, I'm a believer in like simple plots. I really like when plots are simple. And I'm not saying these movies are weird because they have fairly simple plots, but sometimes they are told in the most convoluted way. It's like we
Yeah.
make a big circle to go into a straight line.
Yeah, like I just did this here. Like I went to Wikipedia and I copied the synopsis of Chest of Gold. And this is an 83-minute movie. And I copied it and I put it into pages to get the word count. And the synopsis on Wikipedia is over 1,000 words for an 83-minute swordplay movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's yeah, you know,
Yeah,
there's something wrong there for me. That doesn't add up.
Well,
just
yeah, but Wikipedia is always kind of, I think, kind of much more of an indication of the enthusiasm of whoever's writing
Correct.
that
It's
document.
not a scientific algorithm. Absolutely.
No, and I'm sure you could find if you search the one that if you kind of go to the one that's on IMDb or kind of one of these places, I'm sure you'll find a 2 or 3 line synopsis that fairly succinctly explains kind of what's going on in the movie without taking 1,000 words to do so. And that's you've just encountered somebody who loves these movies and is trying their damnedest to explain every beat in the hope that it's going to kind of get more people over
Did
to
you
check
write
out the
it?
film.
Did you
No,
write it, Dragon? Is it
no,
you?
no, I'm not guilty. No.
Dragon, at some point, I think maybe Adam and Zach just don't have fractured souls. Maybe they have more pure souls.
Quite possibly, quite possibly. I think it's. I don't know. I think we're. It's still going to come back to that first big stumbling block where I think because you guys haven't fallen in love with Shintaro Katsu in this role, um, that's going to be something that's really difficult to get past. Because if you do, it allows you to overlook and quite willingly sort of embrace, not necessarily always understanding exactly what every up and down of the plot is doing. And there's certainly you do encounter a huge, enormous roster, like literally hundreds and hundreds of supporting actors across this series of movies, and they're it's sometimes hard to know who to put your stock in, how much kind of value or worth you should attribute to which particular storyline. Because I think that's less important really than just kind of watching Shintaro Katsu make his way through whichever kind of new situation he finds himself in. And that's where I suspect I certainly can speak for myself, but I suspect for Chris too, that's where the joy in these movies comes, right? It's really from following kind of Zatoichi on his path, and if you don't connect with that, it's going to make these movies a tough sit. I can absolutely see and hear that from your guys' experience of kind of trying to kind of jump into the series, and that's totally fine. Like, it's not movies aren't don't touch us all in exactly the same way, and some of it might be something that you kind of have to be in the right headspace for. I think hopefully after hearing us speak, maybe if you kind of try watching one in a different frame of mind in a couple of years' time, maybe it might resonate with you more. But I think it's going to be a fundamental struggle unless you can kind of fall in love with the man himself, and without that, it's going to make it a difficult journey. I certainly admit.
There's, you mentioned Monsieur Hulot. I've been thinking about that a little bit because I certainly know what you mean, but it's interesting that that was your perception because so generally speaking, do y'all like Columbo series or Peter Falk as
Yeah,
a
very much so.
I've never seen it.
I've
okay?
never seen Columbo either, but I really love Peter Falk in
Wings of Desire.
Wings of Desire. Yeah, I love
Wow.
him in that.
Okay.
So
Wow.
Columbo does this interesting thing. You could also probably look at David Carradine in the Kung Fu series, but maybe a little bit less so. But Columbo becomes he's a bumbling fool to people that are arrogant and um, just see him as this like slovenly detective, right?
Hmm.
But every single episode, he kind of finds a way to trick arrogant, stupid people, and
Hmm.
that's sort of like the main theme of Columbo. And it's another one of these ones where I think you either like the character or you don't. And if you don't resonate with him, then the series is going to be a struggle. But I've always loved Columbo, and I think it's for very similar reasons that I like Zatoichi, where they're always underestimated.
Hmm.
Every single time they come onto a new scene, they're underestimated. And they're sometimes even underestimated by people that know them and have seen them win. It's
Yeah.
like it's like just by the fact that they're not braggadocious and sort of beating their chest, they just get overlooked. And to be not to be dramatic, but I've structured the way that I approach the world it based on some at least 10% of my personality in the workforce is based off of Zatoichi and Columbo and these roles where you don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be good. And so these films, not only do I like them as movies, but philosophically they were very influential for me. And even to this day, when I'm in my sales mode, um, people just don't believe me when I tell them that I'm tripling my quota. They just don't get it because I'm not like a slick banker style salesperson or somebody who's going to come in and like convince you like so what is the whole thing like sell ice to an Eskimo? Like I wouldn't do that because the Eskimo doesn't need ice, right? And so like I don't fit the profile of like a salesperson and people are confused at how I'm always winning deals. And I'm not saying that I base my whole personality on Zatoichi, but I resonate very deeply when I find these characters that just they're so self-assured and they're so self-confident that they can just go into any new situation and they don't have to win anybody over, but they know exactly what to do and how to do it. And if push comes to shove, they'll win the fight.
Hmm.
And those characters just hit me in a very deep level. And so I think I'm just going to it's difficult for me to watch these films objectively. Let me say it that way. I've always been interested in Buddhism, Taoism, like this there's all this philosophy and religion and spirituality around uh, this type of character. And I think that he's the personification of a lot of very ancient philosophy in China and Japan and like in that part of the world. Um, and he has a lot of wisdom in the way that every step he takes is like intentional. And there's just yeah, there's something that I really love about it. So I don't even say any of this to convince you. Just to say like there's a deeper reason than just these being movies why this character resonates with me so much. And I think it's a very soothing character for me to watch.
I like how you inadvertently called me an arrogant and stupid at the start of that, but the rest of your point was really poignant, so I'm not even mad.
It
I
was an
guess that
accidental take if it
we can
wasn't.
maybe reduce it down to this. So it's like Zach and Adam, if we discount all the prequels and sequels, but let's just kind of go back to proto perfect era Star Wars, right?
Uh-huh.
Were you more of a Han Solo fan or were you more of a Luke Skywalker fan?
Um,
I would say I really like Luke. I like Han. I mean, he's a fun character.
I like
Hmm.
them both,
But
yeah.
yeah, like
Okay.
I'm a big Luke guy. I always have liked him.
Yeah, I
That was
really couldn't
that was
choose.
I was kind of expecting that you would both be sort of more Team Han, and like as a kid, Han Solo was always impenetrable to me because I never had that degree of confidence. I always felt like the overwhelmed kind of sort of stumbling to find my way. So Luke Skywalker was always a kind of more natural sort of, I guess, progression for me to kind of identify with. And I think what Chris said about Zatoichi is very resonant because I think he's a he's a hero that's much easier for me to embrace because he speaks more to how my own, I guess, my own kind of journey through the world has been. Not that I'm blind or an immensely skilled sword fighter, but certainly that I've probably found myself not being the loudest, most alpha guy in the room in most situations, and you kind of find a way to kind of make your path and do as best as you can in life accordingly, right? And I think he's not he's not the sort of hero that we would see. Weirdly, there is a lot of similarities between the character that his brother plays in Lone Wolf and Cub in terms of proficiency, but
Hmm.
they're coming from a very different place emotionally. Where I think Ogami Ito in Lone Wolf and Cub is driven by pure rage
Yeah.
and kind of by revenge being the motivating driving force for him to kind of go up against who he's going up against. Where here we're seeing the exact polar opposite of that. We're seeing somebody who's desperate to not fight, and then is sort of drawn into situations because he ultimately knows if he does, he's going to kill everybody, and he's going to feel guilty about it. I mean, at the beginning of Chest of Gold, the gravesite that he's going to visit is somebody who he struck down. I mean, I think the synopsis alludes to that fact, but we see that encounter in one of the previous movies, and that
Yeah.
guy who he goes up against is someone who, as Chris explained earlier on, is someone who sees Zatoichi for exactly who he is, and that dude is sick, I think, and Zatoichi really doesn't want to kind of fight him, and circumstances pushes those two together, and Zatoichi ultimately ends up killing him very reluctantly and is super broken up about it. I think it's one of
Hmm.
the times in the series that we see him more devastated because he kind of meets a kindred spirit that he doesn't want to have to extinguish, but ultimately does. And so he describes him as a friend when he's going to visit the gravesite. He doesn't describe as, hey, I'm going to visit some guy who I murdered a couple of years ago. He's going to see someone who he's really sad and sorrowful that he took out of the world. And I think there's a pathos to the character that's really endearing. And I find it kind of just eminently watchable. So although these movies are often quite formulaic, I never find the formula getting stale. And it's hard to know another character that's true of. Like even in, I mean, James Bond certainly got up to those sort of levels in terms of number of features, but they vary wildly in quality, and some of them are spectacularly unwatchable and really bad as we kind of get into some of the cheesier entries of the Roger Moore kind of era. And I find Pierce Brosnan a tough sit at the best of times, and Daniel Craig, different conversation again. But I think it's hard to kind of find a series that's managed to maintain its integrity and its quality over this sort of runtime and spawn a spin-off TV series as well. But a kind of a few kind of more modern entries. I think maybe if you ever want to scratch the Zatoichi itch again in the future, maybe Chris, we should try and get them to kind of watch the Beat Takeshi version because I wonder if maybe that would deliver more on the kind of action and style stakes that would make it a little bit easier to get into.
Yeah, I
I
was
don't
gonna
know.
say, so do y'all know the name off the top of your head, Beat Takeshi or Takeshi Kitano? Does that name sound familiar?
Takeshi
No.
Kitano does sound familiar. Let me
So
find
he
out
was the
why.
teacher in Battle Royale as one. I mean,
Oh, I know him. Yeah, yeah. Dude's
but
awesome.
he had a long career.
Is he
He
a
had
director as well, though?
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where I know him.
Director, actor, TV host of a crazy assault course reality show. And
Takeshi's Castle.
Oh, Takeshi's Castle. Ah,
yes,
duh. Yes, I know Takeshi Kitano. Sorry.
But he was a huge fan of these series and made a really beautiful tribute to it. That is somewhere between a Zatoichi movie and Takashi's Miike take on it, in the sense that it's more bloody and way
hmm
more frenetic at times. Um, yeah, it's that would be that. I actually did think about it for this, but I just really wanted to stick to the canon just for the first introduction. But yeah, that would be a good idea. The other thing I think quickly, if we before we go too far and talk about Yojimbo, the one thing, just if anybody listening is curious about Zatoichi and the chest of gold, I do think it's worth mentioning. One of the things I really like about this movie is that throughout the whole runtime of the film, he's basically hated by everyone. Because there's the whole plot is kind of based around these villagers that they're throwing a party when he meets them because they finally paid off their debt, and it's in a literal chest of gold, and that gold gets stolen, and they think he has something to do with it, so they want to kill him, and he has to go clear his name, and so he goes and tries to figure out who did steal it, and there's a lot of shenanigans going on and it's a corruption between the government, um, at kind of like the highest levels of that region, and as he's going in as a masseuse and kind of going in under the radar, he learns about a lot very quickly just by being good at listening and being good at asking the right questions. And they quickly find out that so he's against them, and now they hate him. And so the whole movie, he's just going back and forth between two groups that hate him, and he can't do any right. And he gets beat up a lot. And there's even a scene at one point in the movie where he's getting drugged by a horse, on like a rope. But everything he's doing in this movie is because like he knows what needs to be done, and he's willing to do it at any cost. Um, and I think there's a lot of tension in this film. Just I don't know, I just felt bad for him like throughout the whole movie, because he just like every single person he goes to is mad at him for something, and he just goes back and forth between people that are angry at him or want to kill him, um, until he finally uncovers the plot. So it's like a satisfying, moment when the villagers get to see him, for being above board and honorable, after he spent his whole movie kind of clearing his name. But to me, this is one of the more, and again, this is not, I don't mean to convince y'all, this is just, for me, this is one of the more interesting ones in the series because there's so much going on, and I think he really takes a beating in this movie, emotionally, um, and physically, and he kind of lets himself get beat up, in order to let people kind of vent their anger and stuff, which is a common thing that happens with him as well throughout the movies. Like he doesn't mind taking a bit of a beating. It's almost like he views himself as somebody that's worthy of a beating or something. So he kind of takes it at times.
it's a good call. And I kind of wondered, Chris, if you'd suggested this because it was another one that kind of gave us a little bit of an insight into some of his backstory again, because there's the sort of Yakuza gang that live at the top of the mountain, and that he's kind of alluded to has had a little bit of a past with, where at one point he's maybe run with that gang because the boss there he still calls boss, and he kind of goes to them really to try and get to the bottom of if his men have been involved in this plot. And it kind of comes up against Zatoichi, and there's still an enormous amount of respect between the boss and Zatoichi, where the boss knows full well what he's capable of, and they still have a pretty kind of solid relationship, even though he's at odds with some of the members of, and has killed a couple of members of that gang.
Yeah.
And it's never really kind of made expressly clear that he has ever been in the gang alongside those other members. You kind of get a sense that a lot of the people from that gang have fallen by the wayside, and
Right.
so he's kind of coming back to them after a kind of a long period of time wandering elsewhere. But yeah, I'd kind of wondered if because it is, again, I agree with you. I think it's one of the ones that's plotted, maybe more tightly and more intricately, but in a really effective way than some of the other ones.
Yeah.
And there are some of the other movies that do have a more simple, straightforward narrative. if we can convince can Adam to try and watch more, but because they aren't always this dense. Sorry, Adam, when you go.
But this one was a last minute pivot. I know we need to get into Yojimbo in a second, but we weren't originally supposed to watch Chest of Gold, right, Chris? You chose, I think it was Flashing Sword was one that you
Yeah,
had chosen, and then you
that's
switched
right.
to this one.
That's right. Yeah, I there was two reasons I chose it. One of when I rewatched it, I had forgotten how beautiful this is shot. Just just simply how beautiful the movie looks. Like that whole scene up in the mountain and then where he frees them in a way and they come running down the mountain with the lanterns. I just think that scene is just so stunning. And the
Yeah,
cinematographer a Kurosawa collaborator. He worked on Rashomon and Yojimbo and series of movies. His name was Kazuo Miyagawa, but he was a very well established studio cinematographer. I just love the way this film looks is one, and then two is yeah, I do think I resonate the most with the movies where you learn a little bit about his past and you get to see the struggle more in a more real way because he's like trying to change his past in a way or like trying to revisit it and kind of heal it, I think at times.
they're one of the ones that get some kind of wonderful sort of exterior locations because that wasn't always the case. Certainly, kind of in the earlier movies, we were quite often studio bound and like and almost doing the Shaw Brothers thing before Shaw Brothers would kind of adopt that model and then run with it themselves, where an awful lot of it is kind of artificially created. Even the sort of scenes that are presented as being exteriors in the earlier movies were often just on a soundstage. But
Right, right, right.
by the time we kind of get up to the higher entries, we are getting out and about in the world, and there is some kind of really magnificent locations and some kind of beautiful cinematography, often under really challenging situations. Kind of they didn't often shoot kind of day for night. Oftentimes you are seeing kind of night for night, and they're still kind of finding a way to kind of eke out some sort of scale throughout the sky and things. So yeah, it's beautifully, absolutely beautifully photographed, and the kind of lantern sequence in particular is really striking. And yeah, I'm right there with you. I thought it was a good pick.
I suppose we'll jump into you, Jimbo, then, just because we're getting up there now in time. I'm not going to read the synopsis from Letterboxd because it's long as fuck. So I'm just going to read the one from the Criterion Channel instead, because just it actually sums it up a little bit better. So this one's from 1970. Zatoichi treks to a village that has always been a favorite spot of his, only to discover that it's become a living hell, plagued by feuding father and son yakuza, as well as the younger crime boss's bodyguard, Toshiro Mifune's scruffy, smart-mouthed, cash-hungry Yojimbo. So yeah, that was like the letterbox one is way fucking longer than that. Um, I'll kind of jump in on this one for a change. Um, so I love Mifune. I think he's a phenomenal actor. He's one of the greatest actors of all time. I think we can pretty much all agree on that. He's a force of nature.
Mhm.
He's terrific. I'm not the biggest Yojimbo fan. Probably because I saw Fistful of Dollars like first, and I love Fistful of Dollars. So when I watched Yojimbo, I was like, I kind of just prefer Fistful of Dollars.
Oh.
Um, but
It's
I'm
a
but I'm
better
a
movie. It's fine.
but I'm a big Mifune fan, especially one of my favorite Kurosawa movies is Throne of Blood,
Mhm.
because I'm a big Macbeth fan. And I think he's phenomenal in that, and he's phenomenal in pretty much everything I've seen him in. So I was really excited to see him in this, and he's good in this, even if his characters are just a little bit odd in terms of like he just flip flops a lot as to whether or not you should kind of like him or not like him. Um, my biggest issue with this film, I was actually quite liking it quite a bit, and then I paused it to I don't know, maybe go to the toilet or do something. I paused it for some reason, and I was like, yeah, we're really getting in here. We're probably nearly done. I paused it, and it was like we're not even halfway done. It's like, fuck. How are we not even like halfway through? I can't really justify why this film is 30 minutes longer than the other ones. This film is 2 hours long, and I don't think it needs to be. Pacing is certainly a massive issue in this film. I think if you were able to find a way to gut 20 to 30 minutes out of this film, then I would have probably liked it a lot more if it was just a bit snappier. Because I think there's a lot of building blocks there in this film to be like a really great film. And obviously Kiichi Okamoto, who directed it, is a good filmmaker, probably best known for The Sword of Doom. Um, so a talented director. I'm just not really sure what happened with the writing on this, because I can't really think of a logical reason why this film is suddenly 2 hours long when I'm looking at all the rest of them. Up until this film, the longest one was an hour and 35 minutes. I'm just trying to say, no, this is the longest one since the first film. The first one, The Tale of Zatoichi, is an hour and 36 minutes. And all the rest of them are shorter until this one, and this is an hour and 56. And I just don't know why it's way
And they
longer.
took longer to make this one, right? Because like this is the only time there's a gap. Like the last one before this was 1968, and then they jumped to 1970, which is crazy for a series that I think in 1 year had 4 movies come out.
Yeah, Shintaro Katsu was doing a few other productions, other places in between, and I think that the reason for the increased running time is because Toshiro Mifune's not here as a guest star; he's a co-star, and you've got to eke out a good chunk of time for somebody who at that point was a massive star. It was a huge get, and they're very aware of what they're doing here, and this is literally kind of Zatoichi's meeting unofficially of kind of one of Kurosawa's kind of most memorable and kind of most influential parts. So I think it has that runtime to allow both of them to flex, really, so that the people who are going there for Mifune aren't feeling shortchanged by the fact that their heroes not getting that much screen time. So I think the increased runtime is because you basically have two main leads, right? They're kind of both arguably protagonists. I think Mifune is not the antagonist in the situation. He's another hero. He's a different type of hero, a more kind of gruff one and a more drunk one. But he's, I think the runtime's just so that they can both have kind of equal billing to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the couple things jump out. I agree with that. The couple things jump out at me for this one. One is I do think this is another one where the cinematography is just stunning. I always love watching this movie. I really like the way, I mentioned this earlier, but I really like the way that weather is used here, because they kind of go through seasons in the film. So he starts off in a rainstorm and a fight the Zatoichi starts off in a rainstorm and a fight, and then he wants to go back to his village. So you watch him get just kind of beat up by this rain. He just looks miserable, and he's just talking about wanting to see like a nice spring breeze. And like as somebody who can't see, like all he has to go on are like his other senses, right? So he associates his hometown with the peace and serenity, and there's a hot spring, and he's gonna go get this nice breeze and just relax and kind of get out of the elements. And then he goes into the city that's been like overturned into turmoil by this very violent boss. And so I think I like the way the story is built. I do actually think this one can get indulgent at times, so I don't disagree, Adam, with your feeling that it's a little bit too long. Like there's a lot of references to the movie Yojimbo that are very direct, right? Like when he first walks in, everybody's kind of bored. The coffins is one. When he first walks into the town, everybody's boarding up the windows, and it looks like that you could do scene for scene with Yojimbo when they're kind of not wanting to be seen and they're shutting the windows and looking in. The coffins are a big one. He has that whole exchange with the guy, right, about how many, I'll give you 4 more coffins, like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So maybe you could have had some of that stuff taken out, but I think, to Dragon's point, you had to give equal screen time to Mifune, so I'm sure that was written in intentionally, knowing he'd appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they only got one beat short of, like, if they'd cast Tetsuya Nakadai as the other spy who comes in with the gun, then they would have completely removed any elements of doubt that that's what they were doing. But this is unashamedly like Shintaro Katsu's partial tribute, I guess, to kind of the success of the Kurosawa movies, but I think more so to kind of Mifune's legacy. So this is him paying almost reverential respect to another character in Japanese cinema that he clearly was pretty taken by. Because by this point in time, Katsu was his baby completely. It was Katsu Productions that made this movie, and so he's kind of, I think, going out of his way to really make his co-star feel as comfortable and familiar to the audience, and maybe to himself as well on set. But I always get the sense that Mifune was the consummate professional, and he probably wouldn't have objected if he'd had a less to do in the film. But I kind of always saw it as being a sort of token of respect that he was allowing him another bite of a very successful apple in his own sort of personal career. So it was allowing Mifune to revisit and tweak slightly what he did in the Kurosawa movie into sort of maybe a slightly newer place. He's kind of more, he's sassier here than he was in Yojimbo, and a little bit bitchier in a way, particularly with that guy who keeps calling him sensei, who he relentlessly mocks anytime that he speaks to him. So but yeah, the runtime didn't bother me. It didn't faze me being a bit longer.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else much to say. I mean, I think this one is, we've mentioned it already, but this one's a little bit deceiving in the character name of Yojimbo. Despite being so close to the movie Yojimbo, you know, if you remember in those films, his character's name is not actually Yojimbo. It's Sanjuro, and then the second movie in that series is called Sanjuro, and it's more about him, and it's almost more of a comedy actually. I don't want to say I like Sanjuro more, but I might like Sanjuro more. I think that movie is amazing and very underrated. It's very funny. It has some of the best comedy in any Kurosawa movie, and it's just, I don't know. It's very, I love Sanjuro actually. It's a little silly at times, but I like it a lot. But the character in this movie is not called Sanjuro. He's not called Yojimbo. I guess Yojimbo more is used as a way of saying bodyguard. I think his character's name does get revealed as Daisuke at one point, right? So yeah. So he's not even. But so it's this whole thing where it's just kind of maybe a little bit of marketing just to get people in the seats. But I don't think it's a total lie either, because they do get the general sense of the character of from the Yojimbo movie pretty close. Yeah, it's not too far, even if it's slightly false advertising. It doesn't.
I always wonder if it was like a script was written in case they didn't get him. Like they were like, okay, we're going to try to get him, and if it doesn't, we can still use the script without having to change anything.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, that's funny. Because you're right, it could be a new character fairly. I mean, they would have to change some of the stuff, some of the scenes that are like shot for shot, remakes. But it wouldn't be too hard to take this out and put him in another character. Well, I appreciate y'all going down this journey with me, and Dragon, I appreciate you coming on and making a case for the films. I mean, like we always say, we've disagreed a lot on here. No one's ever wrong. It's just a matter of what you like and don't like.
Well, except for when you don't like Vertigo, then you're wrong. Objectively wrong.
No,
I will say thank you for like giving me an opportunity to pull out this set that I've had for like 3 years now.
Oh wait, Zach, you own these films?
Yeah, I do. I found these secondhand like 3 years ago for $30, the Criterion set.
And I was like, sure, that is a great deal.
That's a steal.
I was like, sure, why not? I wasn't going to find it cheaper. So I was like, cool.
Under $1 a movie.
That's fair. That is understandable why it pulled it. I probably would have pulled the trigger at that price too, without seeing them.
And Zach and Adam, can I just double check if you guys have seen Jimmy Wang Yu's One Armed Swordsman series?
No, I haven't actually. No,
but there's like a crossover for that, or is that a different?
That's what I was building to, because I think I don't know if you guys have been getting Arrow's Shawscope sets, which have been incredible, and the third one's just about to drop. And if you guys do pick that up, it has all 3 of the Shaw's entries, 2 of which have Jimmy Wang Yu in them, and ridiculously important movies in the history of Hong Kong cinema and the history of Shaw Brothers, like the first Shaw Brothers movie, widely kind of accepted as breaking the sort of $1 million box office when it kind of came out, and it was a direct response to the success of the Zatoichi series. And so once Jimmy Wang Yu had left Shaw's, he kind of became a pretty well-established director in his own right, and he kind of orchestrated a collaboration with Shintaro Katsu. They made Zatoichi Meets the One-Armed Swordsman. But I would encourage you to definitely watch that movie, but don't do so until you've had a chance to watch the first two One-Armed Swordsman films. The second one in particular, if you're looking for just straight, unadulterated action, I think you would really like Return of the One-Armed Swordsman, but you're going to have to watch the first one before the second to kind of understand why he is the One-Armed Swordsman. But I think if you had been familiar with those films and I'd known which three you were going to pick, I maybe would have selected Zatoichi Meets the One-Armed Swordsman over Zatoichi Meets Yojimbo. But I think for the fact you guys had seen Yojimbo, it was definitely a better pick for this. But there is still more kind of joy and more wonders to be had in that Zatoichi box set. So Zach, do please, I implore you to keep it close to hand and maybe consider revisiting some more of them. And if you're curious about which one to jump into next, my vote would be for Zatoichi Meets the One-Armed Swordsman.
I'm gonna watch I do sorts of ones. I see that directed by Chang Che. I haven't seen much of the Shawscope. I've seen most of the volume one. And I always enjoyed his films, especially like The Boxer from Shantung is probably my favorite kind of Hong Kong action film. I think that film is incredible. And I do typically enjoy wuxia and other kind of Hong Kong action films a lot more than I enjoy a lot more than I enjoy these Zatoichi films. I nearly always enjoy those ones, probably because they are very action packed. But I'm gonna check out these One-Armed Swordsman films for sure, at least the first one anyway.
Yeah, they're already up in the Arrow Player. So if you don't want to kind of commit to buying the box set, you can get a free trial for the Arrow Player pretty easily through Arrow's own app if you've not signed up already, and you can kind of get at least 7 days for free. And you can.
I have a subscription for it. That's how I watched all Volume 1. I don't own any of them, so.
Perfect.
I also have a subscription that they won't cancel, so I'm doing great.
Then there's no excuse. Both of you should jump into the One-Armed Swordsman movies.
Yeah. Cool. Just before we wrap up then, just to tell you what's happening next time around. So we probably won't be back for another episode until kind of early December, but it is still November now, so we have to do a noir episode. I think it's only fair. We pretty much do one every year at this stage. So I've had this one kind of sitting in the back pocket for a little while in terms of what I wanted to do for a noir episode. So we're gonna go and we're gonna watch two movies. I know we've been watching three movies for a long time now, per episode, but we're gonna do a two movie episode next time out, and it's gonna be Orson Welles noir. So the next episode, if you want to watch in advance, we're going to be covering The Lady from Shanghai and also Touch of Evil. I haven't seen The Lady of Shanghai in a long time. Probably, I don't even know, at least like 8 years or so. It's been a long time since I've seen that. And I've seen Touch of Evil a couple of times, and I think the film is phenomenal. I have the 4K from Eureka that I've been meaning to actually crack open and watch because I've just been streaming it. I don't know, Chris, you're obviously haven't seen a ton of noirs, as you said, or you're not a big noir guy. Have you seen either of those films?
Oh yeah, I'm excited for this one. This is a great, very, very excited. I've seen both, but I'm gonna watch them again. Yeah.
Zach, have you seen either of these?
I've seen Lady from Shanghai.
Oh man, I can't wait for you to watch Touch of Evil. It's going to be awesome. I'm not going to name names right now. I'm going to try and get a guest on. I have an idea for a guest I think would be really cool.
Orson Welles.
You stole my joke. I was about to say it.
The ghost of Orson Welles is going to be joining us, and he's going to call us all fucking idiots because he hates everybody. But yeah, so obviously we'll be back sometime in early December. I don't know if there's going to be any interview episodes or anything, Chris, in the meantime. I know obviously you're busy with Punk Vacation these days. So it might be something like that in the meantime. If not, like I said, all of our sort of socials, YouTubes, etc., all in the description. I'm going to drop all the Dragon stuff in the description as well. I am also going to put my Blue Sky. I'm on Blue Sky now. I'm kind of trying to move away from X/Twitter. So I haven't made an official They Live by Film account yet or anything. But any new episodes or any news for stuff, I'm going to drop it on there. So if you want to give me a follow on Blue Sky, the link will be below as well. Dragon, thank you very much again for joining us. I'm sorry for subjecting you to my lowbrow takes.
Not at all. It's been absolutely my pleasure, and I'm kind of happy that I was able to kind of have Chris's back a little bit, so it wasn't a kind of a 2 against 1. I feel it's been quite evenly matched.
Oh, this would have been hell for Chris otherwise. He would have fucking hated his life. So lifesaver indeed.
Yeah, very happy to have you on, Dragon. Thank you.
Oh,
Awesome.
My pleasure. Anytime, absolutely anytime, guys. I love listening to the show, and it's been a treat to be on the show.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm one of the 3 hosts of Almost Major, a film podcast dissecting many major indie studios and the films they release. Every week, myself, Charlie Nash, and Bryden Doyle discuss overlooked, forgotten, or bona fide classic indie films via studio-specific miniseries. We've previously covered numerous films from Artisan Entertainment, Lionsgate Films, and New Line Cinema. Titles including The Blair Witch Project, American Psycho, Dogville, But I'm a Cheerleader, Saw, Requiem for a Dream, and Ringmaster, you know, the Jerry Springer film. Anyways, we have a fun time every week, and we hope you will join us. Subscribe to Almost Major wherever you get your podcasts. Now proudly a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.